Imagine picking these perfect, juicy raspberries, but not from a field. Instead, you're in a high-tech tunnel and there's no soil in sight. Today, we're going to dive into a pretty revolutionary method that's completely changing the game for one of the world's favorite fruits. Let's get into how it's done. It sounds like a trick question, right? Can you really grow a plant like a raspberry without the one thing we all assume it needs the most? Actual dirt? Well, the answer is not only yes, but it might just be the future of how we grow our food.
But before we jump into the future, we kind of have to understand the past. To really appreciate why soilless farming is such a breakthrough, we first need to look at all the problems that raspberry growers have been struggling with for, well, generations.
You know, traditional farming is a constant fight against nature. Farmers are up against these devastating soil diseases like root rot that can just wipe out an entire crop. They lose a ton of water to evaporation, and they're always battling weeds, which really drives up labor costs. On top of all that, you're completely at the mercy of having the perfect soil and the perfect climate. With all that risk, your yields are capped. We're talking maybe 600 to 800 kilograms per decker, and you even have to let the land rest. It is a tough, high-risk business for sure.
Okay, so this is where the revolution begins. As a direct answer to all those challenges, a whole new method has popped up: soilless agriculture. It's a complete reimagining of how to grow things, and it all starts with a pretty surprising material. Say hello to cocoa peat. Yeah, coconut coir. This stuff is the foundation of soilless raspberry farming. It's literally made from coconut husks, and what makes it so perfect is that it's sterile, so no nasty diseases hanging around from the start. It holds on to water like a sponge, and it gives the roots a perfect airy home to grow in. It's basically the ideal substitute for unpredictable, messy soil.
So how does it actually work? Well, it's this beautifully precise process. First, you fill up pots or grow bags with that cocoa peat, often mixed with a little perlite for better drainage. Then you plant your raspberry canes, and from that second on, everything the plant needs, every single drop of water, every nutrient, is delivered right to the roots through a system called fertigation. It's like a custom IB drip for plants. And this just shows you the level of control. Growers are constantly checking things like pH, that's the acidity, to create the absolute perfect growing environment.
Now, this all sounds great in theory, but what about the actual results? This is where it gets really exciting, because you know what? The numbers don't lie.
Let's just start with the headline number. With some of the more advanced systems, soilless farming has shown it can produce 3 times the yield of a traditional field in the exact same amount of space. Let that sink in for a second. 3 times! That is an absolutely staggering leap in productivity.
And what's so cool about this chart is how it breaks it down. Look, your traditional farm might get you 800 kilograms, okay? But move into a basic soilless tunnel, bam, you jump to 2,000. But then, with advanced methods like the long cane system, that number can just skyrocket to 2,800 kilograms. The difference is it's undeniable. And it's not just about yield. In a world that's getting more and more concerned about water, this number is huge. Because the water is delivered right to the roots in a closed loop, there's almost zero waste. This can lead to water savings of up to 70% compared to just spraying a field. That is a massive win, both for the environment and for the farmer's wallet.
And think about this for a second. 2 of the biggest headaches for any farmer, weeds and diseases from the soil, are basically solved. No soil means no soil diseases. And growing in controlled pots means no weeds. This slashes the need for chemicals and gets rid of countless hours of back-breaking labor.
Of course, getting those incredible results isn't quite automatic. You can't just set it and forget it. It requires a very precise recipe. And 2 of the most important ingredients are picking the right type of plant and giving it the absolute perfect diet. Raspberry plants basically come in 2 main types. You have prima canes, which are fantastic because they fruit on the new canes that grow in the same year, which gives you a harvest in late summer and fall. Then you have floricanes, the more traditional type. They fruit on canes that grew the year before. Choosing the right one really depends on your climate, your system, and who you're trying to sell to. And this right here, this is basically the plant's diet plan. Look at how specific it is. When the plant is just focused on growing leaves and canes, it gets a high nitrogen formula. But the second it starts to flower and make fruit, that recipe changes. You cut way back on the nitrogen and boost other things. It's all managed within a super precise pH and EC range. EC is just a measure of nutrient strength, to make sure the plant gets exactly what it needs right when it needs it.
And here's the pro tip. Why do you cut the nitrogen? Because if you don't, the plant will just keep pouring all its energy into making leaves instead of making delicious fruit. Too much nitrogen at the wrong time gives you this giant, bushy plant with mushy, low-quality berries. Getting this one switch right is absolutely critical for a great harvest.
So, we've got the technology, we have the recipe for success, but what about the real world? Does this actually make sense from a business point of view? Let's talk about the market, the money, and where this whole thing is headed.
This quote right here perfectly captures the big shift that's happening in the food world. For years, it was all about growth, growth, growth. But now, the raspberry market is maturing. People and supermarkets aren't just looking for the cheapest berry anymore. They want high-quality, sustainably grown fruit. And that is exactly what these soilless systems are designed to deliver.
But let's be real, this is not a get-rich-quick scheme. The upfront investment is pretty significant. You have to build the tunnels, install all the fancy irrigation. It also takes a high level of technical skill to manage it all properly. And you have to remember, raspberries go bad really fast, so you need a rock-solid plan to get them to the market quickly. And that market is often controlled by a few big supermarket chains.
Now, while you could technically set one of these farms up anywhere, the economics tell you where it's most viable. In Turkey, for example, the sweet spots are the cooler highland regions. Why? Simple. Raspberries hate extreme heat. If you tried to grow them in hot coastal areas, you'd have to spend a fortune on cooling systems, and that would just kill your profit margin. The smart money goes where the climate is already on your side.
So we're left with this one big question. We have a technology that uses way less water, gets rid of major diseases, boosts yields like crazy, and produces the high-quality fruit that the modern market is demanding. That is a seriously powerful combination. Could this be more than just a new way to grow raspberries? Could it be a blueprint for a more sustainable, more productive future for farming as a whole? Now that's something we're thinking about.